agenda. Everybody okay with the agenda? Anything to add? Seeing nothing, need a motion to approve the agenda, please. Sally and seconder.
I'll second it.
Kim seconds. Who's going to call the vote?
I will, thank you.
Go ahead.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Ray Price,
Yes.
Michaela Lentz,
I want to abstain. I didn't really read it, to be honest.
Kim Smale,
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
4-1, the motion is carried.
Thank you. Next, adoption of minutes from March 31st. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I need a mover and seconder, please.
I'll move it.
Kim, seconder. Ray, seconds. Call the vote, please, Catherine.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Ray Price,
Yes.
Michaela Lentz, Kim Smale,
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
4-1, the motion is carried.
Okay, Sarah's just texted me, Carolyn. She's trying to get in, but she's not been able to get in. So she's sitting there waiting. No one's answering, she said. Not sure if you see anything from your end.
I'll resend her the link.
Okay. Oh, there she is.
Apologies. I was able
that's
to
all
get
right,
in
Sarah.
finally.
No, we know the frustrations. So we've gone through adoption of minutes and approval agenda. So we're on item 3, disclosure of pecuniary interest. I don't imagine there's any. And next we have our delegation. We have Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. We have Elizabeth Van Horn, General Manager, Secretary Treasurer, and we have Betsy McClure, who's everything trees and clean water. I assume Elizabeth's going to go first. Welcome, Elizabeth.
You're muted, Elizabeth.
There we go. Sorry, can everyone hear me now?
Yep.
And you can see my screen?
Yes, you can.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having us here today to talk about the programs and services of Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. So the Conservation Authority movement really took hold in Ontario back in 1954. It was really spurred on by Hurricane Hazel, which had devastating impacts in the Toronto area on flooding and damage to property. It was around that time that Ontario really began to realize that in order to protect property from flooding and erosion hazards, they needed to take a watershed-based planning approach. And really what we mean by a water-based planning approach is not only keeping development away from flooding hazards and erosion hazards, but a recognition that everyone lives downstream of someone else and that things are interconnected. So things like tree planting or creating wetlands really has a strong mitigation factor against flooding and erosion. And this was recognized as a very effective model back in 1954, and conservation authorities began to develop across the province, and it's still recognized as a very effective way of reducing flood risks even today. So there are 36 conservation authorities throughout the province, and conservation authority is developed around the watershed basis, which basically means a watershed is the land area that drains into a certain body of water. So a watershed doesn't form around municipal boundaries, it really forms around that watershed basis. So for Kettle Creek, there's actually 7 member municipalities within our watershed. Our watershed is hourglass in shape, and some of the defining characteristics of our watershed is erosion. So the watershed actually, the headwaters are at Lake Whitaker in the municipality of Thames Centre. And the creek actually drops about 141 kilometers over its 80-kilometer length. And so I often liken it to a slide. And so when a water event or a storm event happens at our headwaters, that water moves through the system almost like a flash flood and can move through our system down to Port Stanley in about 8 hours. And so our watershed is very defined by erosive nature of the watershed. There are 7 municipalities within our watershed. So Central Elgin, Malahide, Middlesex Centre, St. Thomas, Southold, City of London, and Thames Centre. And each one of those member municipalities, depending on the population within our watershed, are assigned a number of members to sit on our board of directors. These board of directors really define our programs and services in our budget moving forward. In terms of a quick glance, 60% of our revenue is actually self-generated, and this comes from things like our campgrounds. We have 520 square kilometers of jurisdiction and plant about 50,000 trees annually. We have 22 kilometers of hiking trails and a fairly small staff, 11 full-time staff and 22 seasonal staff that we bring on during the summer months, specifically for campgrounds, but also things like tree planting. We're just going to highlight some of our major programs and services. Obviously, the biggest one is our flood forecasting and monitoring. We manage a very comprehensive flood forecasting and warning system. We have 4 stream gauges throughout the watershed that monitor stream flows, and we have 7 rain gauges throughout the watershed. And in 2019, we brought on 20 volunteers throughout the watershed that actually monitor rain events in their local areas as well. And all that information is fed into our system and through historical records and what we're observing on the land. We can predict flood events, and we not only notify our communities about a flood event, but also work with our member municipalities so that they can take appropriate action as well. We have 2 dam structures. Probably the most significant is the Dalewood Dam in St. Thomas, but we also have a smaller dam in Union, the Union Pond Dam. Again, within the last 2 years, we've brought on 2 cameras, which allow us to monitor flooding remotely as well. One of the significant things that is in our watershed is obviously Lake Erie, and some of you are familiar with Port Stanley. We are aware that we've been dealing with historic high water in Lake Erie over the past couple of years. which creates a unique flood risk down in Port Stanley of actually wave uprush when the water is so high in Lake Erie. But we're seeing now in 2021 that while the water is still high, certainly not at the levels that we've seen within the last 2 years. Our other major program is our environmental planning and regulations program. This is where we regulate development and keep activity development adjacent to river or stream valleys, the Great Lakes shoreline, and hazardous lands and wetlands. We keep development out of those areas so that the property isn't at risk of being damaged because of flooding or erosion. The province really sets out a timeline in which we review applications, and I'm pleased to say the staff meet that provincial standard 100% of the time. In 2020, we issued 63 permits in regards to our regulation in terms of keeping development out of those flooding hazards. Our conservation lands are probably our most public program in service and probably what the general public most associates conservation authorities with. We have 2 campgrounds, Dalewood and Lake Whitaker. Both of those generate 100% of their self-generated revenue. So revenue that we're able to put into other programs and services like tree planting. Seasonally, we employ about $211,000 in youth employment. We manage over just about 2,000 hectares of land and 7 properties throughout the watersheds. We have Kirk Cousins Management Area just behind Regina Monday High School in London. We have the Union Pond Conservation Area in Belmont, and then probably our most recognized Dalewood Conservation Area and Lake Whitaker Conservation Area that are associated with our campgrounds. We have 22 kilometers of hiking trails, and obviously over the last year, especially with the pandemic, we've seen a real uptake in the public wanting to access those lands, and about 160% just on our Dalewood Trail as alone, we saw an increase in use in 2020. Our environmental monitoring program, some of you might be familiar with source water protection plans. We had a source water protection plan within the watershed since 2015. It protects 2 sources of drinking water within the watershed. One is the intake down at Port Stanley, the Elgin Area Primary Water Supply, and then we have another water supply in Belmont that source water protection plan protects by having policies in place that keeps development, again, that might put our drinking water at risk away from those sources of drinking water. We also have a comprehensive environmental monitoring program that has, we monitor a variety of different things throughout the watershed, including water quantity and quality. We do groundwater samplings and electrofishing throughout the watershed, as well as benthic sampling. Benthics are basically those little creatures that live in the bottom of the stream. And by sampling those, we can see how healthy the stream system is throughout the watershed. With all of that information, we put it into and report back to the public through our watershed report card system. This report card is produced every 5 years. And as well, all that data is shared with a variety of different government programs as well. The map that you're seeing on your screen is actually a screenshot from our watershed report card, and it's showing you basically the grade for our forestry throughout the watershed. So you can see that the lower Kettle Creek, Port Stanley up to St. Thomas has a very healthy forest cover, whereas Dodd Creek and Upper Kettle Creek it has been rated as poor. So the one nice thing about our environmental monitoring program is, one, we can report back to the public on how we're doing with our different programs and services, but it also allows us to target our programs and services effectively for best results. So Betsy will be talking in the next section about some of our stewardship and forestry services. And with maps like this, we know that we need to concentrate some of those programs and services in the upper regions of our watershed to improve the overall health of the watershed in those areas. And with that, I'll turn it over to Betsy, who's going to talk to you more about our outreach and education, forestry, and stewardship.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So we're always active in our community. We provide programs for schools and day camps, and we also recently initiated an environmental youth corps program where local high school students can participate in meaningful hands-on environmental work and in turn collect volunteer hours for their high school diploma. We also coordinate large-scale events that you might be familiar with, so the St. Thomas Elgin Children's Water Festival, the Carolinian Forest Festival, as well as many community stewardship or planting events and tours and workshops for local landowners. Next slide. As far as our tree planting program, on average, we're typically getting 50,000 tree and shrub seedlings planted out in our watershed annually. And that usually is around 20 species, a mix of coniferous and deciduous that are planted. And in a typical year, 30% of those seedlings are sold at what we call over the counter to landowners to plant themselves, while 70% are planted by our own tree planting crew. We also initiated the Greening Communities program, which offers landowners in Central Elgin, Southold, Malahide, and St. Thomas the opportunity to purchase smaller quantities of seedlings than our typical seedling program. So this allows some people with smaller acreage or just not a lot of room to still be able to take advantage of our tree planting program. And typically our plantings are focusing on large blocks, windbreaks on farm fields, riparian buffers, creating corridors for wildlife, as well as retirement of fragile or marginal farmland. Next slide. So I have a few slides with just some typical tree planting sites so you can see what types of sites we would typically plant. So this is a smaller non-farm property where the landowner was just mowing a lot of grass. And so we planted about 1.5 acres on this property, adding on to the existing wood lot that was on site, as well as adding a couple of windbreaks for privacy. So there you can see the comparison from 2014 to 2018 of how that project's come along. Next slide. This next site was planted in 2011, and it was 2 small fields within the floodplain of Kettle Creek that were difficult to access with farm equipment. So the landowner agreed to restore the 9 acres of land through tree planting. This is an ideal site. As you can see on the map, it was infilling gaps in the existing forest tracts and in areas adjacent to Kettle Creek. And so there was a real mix of deciduous and coniferous trees planted that were all native to this area. Next slide. So as far as stewardship goes, we have our own stewardship funding program that was established in 2012, and that's the Kettle Creek Clean Water Initiative. And through that program, up to $12,000 is provided annually to watershed landowners to take on environmental projects such as wetland creation, erosion control, or tall grass prairie planting. And over 25 projects have been funded since that program was started. And in addition, staff are always actively seeking other grants through provincial or federal programs or private foundations in support of tree planting and stewardship programs within our watershed. Next slide. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time today. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Elgin Clean Water Program, but I thought I would just summarize the highlights of the program as well as the progress that we've made to date. Next slide. So the program was initiated in 2012 by the 4 Elgin Conservation Authorities, and basically we came together to have a uniform program across the whole county. And the goal was to improve water quality and habitat conditions across Elgin. The program is open to both farm and non-farm landowners, and KCCA administers the program on behalf of the other CAs. And each watershed, the staff are there to help the landowners through the process and provide project oversight. So our funders, Elgin County provides $40,000 annually to the program, and the Green Lane Community Trust Fund has also supported the program for many years as well. In addition to those core funders, we work with our partners to match the Elgin Clean Water funding to help support those landowners. So that's often Ducks Unlimited, the Elgin Stewardship Council, or ALICE, as well as the CAs each typically have their own funding that they can provide for matching dollars as well. Next slide. The program is application-based, so landowners can receive up to 50% funding to the maximum category grant cap. So you can see there that we have well management, which is 50% to a maximum of $500, and that's for well upgrades or decommissioning. And then we have erosion control, clean water diversion, wetland and riparian restoration, livestock management, and other projects, which is basically a catch-all to ensure any other worthwhile project is considered. And those are all funded at 50% to a maximum of $4,000. And then new in 2017, we added a cover crop incentive, and that was providing an incentive of $20 per acre for up to 50 acres for farmers to plant cover crops that overwinter to reduce soil nutrient loss. And that really was linked to the big push to try and clean up water quality and the phosphorus issues in Lake Erie. Next slide. So progress to date, we've had 235 projects completed since 2012 with, as you can see by that map, some really great distribution across the county. Over 640,000 has been provided in Elgin Clean Water grants, and project costs have now exceeded $2.7 million. Next slide. So I'm going to just take you through a number of projects that have been completed through the program. Next slide, Elizabeth. So the first one is erosion control. This was a farm, 22 acres of the farm was flowing to a 25-foot deep gully, causing a lot of erosion. So this project saw the installation of a berm and 2 water control structures that could help convey that water safely to the bottom of the slope. Next slide. This project was the installation over 1,000 meters of fencing to exclude the livestock from a drain that ran into the Thames River. 2 acres of riparian land was also taken out of production to naturalize. and a new watering system was installed to pump water from a well for the livestock. Next slide. So you can see here this stream restoration project. The outer bank of this was Beaver Creek, had significant erosion caused by some of the high storm events that water would go through there. So in-stream structures were installed and vegetation was restored to help with the water flow and enhance the fish habitat there. Next slide. Wetland creation continues to be the most popular category in the program. In 2020, that was our most funded project with 12 wetland projects completed. And wetland coverage across the county is quite low, much around 2%, so much lower than the 10% that's recommended by Environment Canada. So these projects will go a long way in helping to bolster our wetland numbers. Next slide. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this site. So this is a municipal project that was funded by Elgin Clean Water. And this was 3.5 acres in between the Elgin County Administration Building and the new Provincial Offences Courthouse. And so instead of maintaining mowed grass in that area, a naturalization plan was developed. And so a mix of over 20 species of native grasses and wildflowers were planted at this site. And then following that, the site was planted with trees, seedlings, and basically the grasses and wildflowers will provide biodiversity and habitat for pollinators and grassland bird species until the eventual succession to forest habitat many years later. Next slide. And just lastly, some of the projects are larger landscape projects with multiple different project types on one site. So as you can see from this map, the site involved wetland creation, which is the blue areas, tree planting, which was the green, and tallgrass prairie plantings, which was the orange. So totaling a lot of acres restored. Next slide. And we continue to get positive feedback about the program, not only the importance of the funds for the landowners to carry out the projects, but also the support landowners receive from the CA staff and the ease of the process. So it's nice to hear that the program's working well across the county. Next slide. And that's just the Elgin Clean Water website, and that's where you can find all the eligibility requirements and any forms you may need.
Mr. Chair, that was the end of our presentation, but we're certainly open to questions from the committee if there are any.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions? Just thought it was nice if for people that didn't understand how the Conservation Authority worked and the programs it offered, is a good time to have a little demonstration from Elizabeth and Betsy on what's available and what conservation authorities are all about. Don't see any questions.
Grant, I have a couple of questions, and sorry, I've been a little bit late here, but I got most of it. Has there been, like, I understand that the drainage ditches and the streams will have buffer zones beside a certain amount of buffer zone beside the stream, depending on the bank that there is for the stream itself. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I understand that if it has a very steep bank, then there is more space that is supposed to be as a naturalized zone or a buffer zone before a field is accessible. Is there any of that process that is for the streams and the drainage ditches. I don't know whether a drainage ditch carries the same clout as what a stream does or not. Are you following?
Yeah, if I understand, like a regular drainage ditch probably wouldn't fall under the regulation of the authority in terms of development, staying back from it. Yeah.
So in other words, like a drainage ditch, they can get as close to the drainage ditch as possible with the agricultural landowners. Am I correct at that?
Yeah, the Conservation Authority really doesn't regulate agriculture. We're more about development, so actually building or alteration. So we would never prevent or get involved in the agricultural practices of a farmer or how close they're getting to a drainage ditch.
Rob, just so you know, some municipalities do encourage riparian buffer around drainage ditches.
That's what I was sort of getting at, is because that if we're gonna start to move like all these drainage ditches at one time, I'm pretty sure were streams and got designated as drainage ditches. So I'm trying to figure out, like, when did that conversion actually happen? Like, I know several of them in our areas that are designated as drainage ditches, but they're really a stream, and they've always been a stream. So as soon as they got the drainage ditch access, then obviously there's other things that come with that. And I'm just wondering, is there ways that we could start to maneuver to start to like get a little bit of a buffer zone beside these old natural streams that got converted to drainage ditches? Has there been any talk of that, or is that just a non-issue at this point?
One of the hardest things I find with the municipalities and with our staff is that they want to go in and clean those ditches out every so often, get rid of the trees, etc. We actually have an old one through our property that we've never even told them about, or we're glad that they ignore it because it's full of trees and we want to leave it that way. Well, it's on the edge of a woods, but I do know that's a concern I've had, was that they feel they have to clean them in order for them to function, to drain, because there's a lot of tile that drains into those ditches.
Correct. And the faster they get the water access out of there, which, sometimes I've seen some, like in the drainage ditches, I know over at Green Lane that they left a small section, old ditch in place. And it's really done an amazing things. I got some pictures of it and stuff like that, but it's actually raised the water level up in the whole drainage ditch rather than letting it run out. So now you can see that there's actually things that are surviving into that drainage ditch again. And it's due to the fact of a different process. I don't know whether they knew what was happening there or not, but what they did do was they left that 100 foot stretch of natural, and it was still like it has the cattails onto it. They didn't touch that section. And what it did is it backed up the drainage ditch for a certain long period of area to where that there's frogs and there's things that are surviving in that ditch, which I was impressed about. And then some of these smaller drainage ditches that we have, they could be sort of controlled dams, like what you've expressed already, to be able to start to retain a little bit of water in those things, but still allowing the flow if it gets heavy enough to where the flash flood or whatever, to where it releases that water. But and I'm sort of like, these are the areas that we need to start to work on if we're going to make progress with the Clean Water Act. And in the drainage ditches, I see as a way of hopefully, and working with the agricultural community and at obtaining some more grants to be able to get a little bit more of a buffer zone around these areas, which only helps out the stream or the drainage ditch anyway, to take out the phosphates from it. So just any new improvements that you've noticed into the stream restorations, or is there anything there that you've heard about?
I can speak. I mean, there's definitely lots of funding out there right now, but it's once again going back to having a willing landowner that wants to give up that much acreage to be able to, you know, naturalize those spaces. That is where some programs, like we can provide the establishment costs so that there's no cost to the landowner to do that. And that's where a program like Alice can also help, because they'll provide an annual payment for the land that they're giving up. So, you know, there are mechanisms out there to achieve, I think, what you're looking to do. But it's just finding those landowners that are willing to do it. And there's lots of out there that are currently, but you also have the ones that are farming right to the top of the bank as well, right?
So is there any way that we could go at MPAC and try to go at them to be able to do a tax reduction for the whole farm in creating a buffer zone on the side in conjunction with the Clean Water Act?
There's different mechanisms to get the tax benefit, but typically if it's an agricultural property, they're already getting the lowest tax they can. I mean, there's managed forest, but if it's a drain, you're not going to be likely planting trees because they could get removed during a clean out. Or if your property's deemed provincially significant, then you can get a full reduction in your taxes. So that's a little tricky.
So as far as like that would have to be into the provincial section to where they started to implement it in through the tax and then go that route, right? That would likely be the more sensible way of going at it. For us to try to go at it, it would likely never happen.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the creek you talked about up at Greenland, that's actually the top end of Dodge Creek, I believe, that ditch that Kettle Creek.
Well, actually, it's the one that flows the other one. You're right. It's the one right at Green Lane there, but they've left it. It goes towards the river. It's that section there, and they've left a little section there. And like I say, I was down there last week, and there was all sorts of frogs in there, and I was actually very surprised at what was surviving in there because it's not a clean flow right to the main stream. So this is an offshoot of it. It's a drainage ditch. But I was sort of impressed. I got like I didn't think there'd be anything living in there, but there is things that are surviving in there and calling it their home. So it was kind of nice to see. And I don't know whether that's the plan is to dig that out at a later date, but you know, from what I saw, it was just a resistance in there. And the flow, if it got enough flow, it would just go right over top of it anyway. So it just sort of held that water there for. It's the first time I've seen it happen. So I was impressed with it. I thought it was kind of cool the way that it had been done and retained some of the water there.
I guess from my years on council and dealing with the Drainage Act and municipal drains, it seems to be a tug of war, right? It's once what was possibly a creek is all of a sudden part of the municipal drain. Now you have a different set of circumstances where landowners have the right to ask for drain maintenance, and unfortunately, that's called removing trees when it comes to an open ditch and,
right.
and cleaning the ditch. And unfortunately, the way the Drainage Act reads, they have that right to ask for that and expect to have that done. Until that changes, municipalities' hands are tied because we have to follow the rules of the Drainage Act. And I know they are looking at change. I know the province right now is looking at the Drainage Act for a few changes. What those changes are, who knows? That's the time will tell what happens there. But I'm not exactly sure which ministry manages the Drainage Act. Is it Mr. Environment or is it Natural Resources?
I think
OMAFRA.
Yeah.
AFRA. Oh, yes, that'd be correct. Yeah. So I guess that's a discussion for OMAFRA reps to see where their heads are at with that kind of thing.
All right. Now I have one other question for Elizabeth. Like, where is the major part of the pollution coming from for the, like, let's say Kettle Creek? Would it be the is it the phosphates that are the major problem? Is it the phosphates? Is it the cities, or is it the agricultural? Is it just a both of it, or is it everything that's going into it? Is there
Yeah, I'm not one to point fingers. I think, like I said at the top of my presentation, everything is connected. Upstream affects downstream. So I don't think there's one specific person that we can point out to. I think we're all involved with this together. It's all of it that's contributing. I think the biggest problem, like I said, for Kettle is the erosive nature of our water. So many people say, why is Kettle Creek brown? Something's wrong with it. And it's brown just because we constantly have soil coming off of the landscape into the creek. And so our best way to combat that, I think the most effective thing, both for climate change and for the health of our watershed, are the things that Betsy is currently doing, or the programs that we're focusing on, and that's wetland creation and tree planting, because the benefits of those two types of programs are basically a windfall, both for what you mentioned in terms of pollution, but also climate change moving forward.
Yeah, I guess my point is that we have to find out where the problem is and make the people that are there as a responsible item to take care of it, because the government's urging this sort of thing to be cleaned up, but they need to help us out, obviously. And I know that you guys are doing everything you can to try to do the best job you can, but it still holds responsibility. That somebody has to be held responsibility, who are the major polluters, and the major polluters are the ones that should be in, whether it's a city or whether it's an agricultural community or whether it's an industrial site or it's whatever it is. It doesn't matter, but people need to be held accountable for what's happening, and then try to make them go back at the restoration part of it, and to help you guys out. But that was just a question I had. I didn't know whether you knew the exact answers as to whether it was 50-50 or 25-25, but there's no figures like that available. All right, thank you so much.
Okay. Anything else for Elizabeth or Betsy before we let them go?
Councillor Jones?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Betsy, because right now we have an Elgin Clean Water project happening in the back of my property. Lower Thames is a partner, of course, and they are planting trees as we speak. I can see them out my window. Beautiful wetland project as well. So thank you very much.
I think you should have been declaring a conflict of interest or something.
First, I checked.
Anyway,
I have one last question. I don't know whether you can answer this one or not, but I understand that the agricultural community has a discount for wooded lot areas, that it's down to, I think it's $30 for a regular one and like $10 an acre for any of the forest land. And I've checked out a lot of GPSs, and I've gone through back 20 years and do a lot of these things, and a lot of them haven't really changed that much. But has there anybody that ever thought about going back into a GPS and log exactly what was there 20 years ago and then start to bring that forward? Or is that just too complicated of a process to try to analyze? So I'm wondering about, let's say that some of these properties they're all shrinking, but if a major section has shrunk that we know of, would the old records from GPS be ever able to be used?
I mean, that's a better question. Jeff Lawrence, who does the county bylaw, there are time limitations of when you can go back and prosecute or look at clearings. So that's typically done on complaint basis as they're happening.
Right.
But we do through mapping monitor, so we get every 5 years aerial photography that we will then analyze forest cover to see how conditions are changing within the watershed. So it isn't necessarily used for the purpose you're speaking of, but it does allow us to see how conditions are changing and if there's perhaps certain areas that maybe we need to target for more tree planting.
I'm more of a person that doesn't want to go back that route anyway, because I don't think you get there that way. I think that we just still got to try to do what you guys are doing and find more resources for you guys to help out. And I think the best way is going at a tax avenue for them to be reduced taxes on the overall farm. If they put another 2 or 3 or 4 acres, then reduce it so it's permanent and it's continuous for that landowner to be able to do that. And we have to be able to make them more profitable to restore now than it is to use, or the same sites are for urban land use as well. So I think that's the best way, and I think that's the way that I will try to go at in the future, is to try to figure out a way of being able to get more resources into the hands of the agricultural community in order to start to restore the areas and build up on it, because we're short right now and we need to do something hopefully shortly. Doesn't seem possible, but anyway.
Okay.
Well, that's good information. Thank you. I didn't know whether you would know those questions or not, but I appreciate it.
If there's nothing else, thank you so much, Elizabeth and Betsy, for taking some time for us today. Really appreciate it, and have a great day.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move down to next item, the green purchasing initiatives update from Sarah and Ray.
Thank you very much. I've been speaking with Mike Hoekstra again, purchasing for the county, and he was able to pass on a program that actually might be of use to us for the sustainable purchasing. And it's called, it's an organization based out of Quebec. So you'll have to excuse my poor accent when I tell you the name. Espace de concentration sur les pratiques d'approvisionnement responsable. So I didn't do the translation, but basically it's ECPAR, and it's a network of organizations that share their expertise in order to become more efficient and optimize the way that they conduct their sustainable procurement. It's financed by the Sustainable Development Goals of Canada program, so it has federal funding, and the members include Recycling Council of Ontario and the Ontario Public Buyers Guide. So those are highly reputable members that are involved in the municipal sector. And the goal there is to just avoid duplication of effort and present harmonized purchasing guidelines. And it also offers a reference tool to evaluate sustainable procurement progress. So a municipality or an organization would kind of fill out this survey as to how they go about their purchasing, and you get feedback from that, personalized from that survey, and then they identify levers for improvement within your organization. And you can also see how you stack up to other members that have taken part in Canada in this organization. And the procurement for this organization takes the kind of the full gamut of sustainability, not just environmental, but also the ethical and social issues, which are all factors in most of the best sustainable procurement guidelines. So this might help us kind of assess where we are now and then how we move forward. And Mike was going to follow up with Tina, who's the manager of procurement for the city of Hamilton, who he knows. And the city of Hamilton does participate in this project and has kind of been very enthusiastic about it. So Mike is going to determine if he thinks that's a good fit for us in determining how we move forward. But it might be kind of a simple way to assess where we are and how to move forward, rather than just trying to blankly copy legislation from other municipalities or universities, other groups like that.
It's quite
So
interesting.
Yeah, I can send that information along to Catherine, and maybe we can all have a look at it and then kind of discuss it at the next meeting once Mike has some more information from the city of Hamilton.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me. Everybody interested in having a peek at it and further discussion?
I would say so. Sounds like a great idea.
Okay. We have no correspondence. I guess we should have a receiving file for that presentation. Can I have a mover and seconder for that presentation? Sarah, seconder.
I'll second it.
And call the vote, please, Catherine.
Warden Marks. Counselor Martin.
Yes.
Sarah Emmons.
Yes.
Ray Price.
Yes.
Rob Brom.
Yes.
Michaela Lentz.
Yes.
Kim Smale.
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
8-0, the motion is carried.
Okay. Thank you. I guess before we set the next date, Julie, is there anything from you want to speak to while you're here, since we have your presence?
You have me for 2 more minutes. It's great to see everyone. I don't have anything to add, but I just want to commend the committee for the great work you've done to date. The presentation from Kettle Creek was excellent, and I look forward to working with Sarah and Catherine on moving the procurement initiative forward from now and until your next meeting. So we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Julie. Anything from Warden? You're on mute, Tom.
I am on mute, not now. Sorry for being late. I did enjoy the presentation from Kettle Creek. I'm actually a neighbor and a big fan of Elizabeth and Betsy, so I enjoyed it. Good to see everyone.
Okay, so Dave, next meeting, want to go 1 month, or how long do you think you need for Mike and Sarah? About a month, or you need 2 months, or?
Right now, Mike and I had discussed him following up with Tina within the next month for the next meeting. So that's what it looks like right now.
Okay. Rob, anything on the things that you've been working on as far as ditches? Are you still working away on things, or?
Well, I'm still checking them out, that's for sure. I've gone through, there was a few things that I missed last time and I forgot to mention them. And one was the phosphate trap that they've been introducing, and they've got a couple test models out on that phosphate trap, which is pretty interesting. If we could start to get a phosphate trap put into the drainage ditches, and that would add a lot to the and apparently you only clean these things out once every 15 years from what I can understand. And I don't have the information on that on hand right now to bring it out. I could start to go through my notes, but unfortunately work's been just about killing me the last few days. So the last weeks, the last months, but anyway, so that was one of the very interesting things that I found that might be a good prospect for a Clean Water Act or for the Clean Water Act was that phosphate trap, because that's one of, as far as I know, that's one of the main problems that goes out into the lake. So if they could start to put in phosphate traps, and that would take care of some of the problem, and it'd be a good experiment to be able to get cash for that sort of thing. So I forgot to mention that to Betsy, but I can write her a note.
Yeah, you can keep looking into it. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I know Betsy, we're kind of waiting. I'm not sure if Brian ever found out about the tree up on the north side of the administration building yet, if they've had anybody come in and look at it, but I'll have to check out. Catherine's got her hand up.
How large is that property? It's not very big, is it? I thought it was the other one on the other side, but that one's already been.
That one's been done.
Yeah,
It's
I
more
noticed that.
than-
I went by there to look at the tree, and I kept looking in there and like, where's the tree? And no, it's on the other side. Okay, now I figured it out. But that's where I was foggy on that one. I didn't understand that it was on the north side and not the south side. I thought we were talking still on the south side, but it's all been reforested already. And then I noticed it when I went by there.
Catherine, you had your hand up.
Yes, I am not sure if the tree has been looked at right now. When I followed up last time, they were waiting until the tree budded to assess its condition. So I'll make sure to follow up with our facilities manager and get back to the committee.
Okay, perfect. Okay, date for the next meeting. So about a month from now, we'll reconvene. Hopefully we can do it.
Grant?
Yeah,
I
go
would
ahead.
request that we don't do it at 1 o'clock, even if we waited till 1:30. I have emergency control meeting with Central Elgin every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and I had to miss that today in order to be here. So I would appreciate it. It's only a half-hour meeting at the most. So if we could wait till 1:30 or go back to the morning, that would be fine with me.
Okay, so we can bump back to the morning if that works better for everybody, or we can even change to a different day, but the morning would work better for me. This one was a one-off, or there's just too many other conflicts, and this seemed to be the only time we could manage it, but I would prefer a morning rather than the afternoon for sure. So, got a date there, Catherine?
It would be June 30th, which is the last Wednesday of the month.
Does that sound okay? Sarah, go ahead.
I have commitments that day for some other committees for Young at Hearts and for Canada Day. Pretty much busy that whole day.
Could we go on a Tuesday? That's the offset of the county meeting, so the county won't conflict. But, Tuesday morning work?
I'm personally busy that day too with Young at Heart. It's that whole week is Canada Day and Young at Heart.
Could we go to the
Bob?
first Wednesday in July instead?
You good?
That would be the 7th.
Yep. That works for me. Are we okay with that one? It sounds like that we'll set it for July 7th at 10 p.m., 10 a.m., I should say. Unless 9 a.m. works better, I'm pretty flexible. We'll go with 10. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Ray, seconder, please.
I'll second.
That was Kim. Call the vote, please. Catherine?
Warden Marks,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Sarah Emmons,
Yes.
Ray Price,
Yes.
Rob Brom,
Yes.
Michaela Lentz,
Yes.
Kim Smale,
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
8-0, the motion is carried.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great
Great.
week.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.